Welcome to the Take Your Apprenticeship podcast. The Take Your Place team is made up of 5 universities and 9 further education colleges from across the east of England. We are an impartial project dedicated to giving you the information you need, regardless of where you're applying to study. Since 2017, we have worked with over 30,000 students from 100 different schools, colleges and sixth forms, helping them to explore their options and discover their potential. Now we hope to help you too. In this podcast series, we will explore all aspects of finding, applying for and succeeding in an apprenticeship. Through talking to experts and current apprentices from a variety of industries, we will help you explore your future apprenticeship options.
Hello there, my name is Kit and my pronouns are they, them, and I am a NACO Higher Education Champion for Take Your Place. For this podcast episode, we listened to a recording for National Apprenticeships Week 2021, where my colleague Rio interviewed Luke Bendall. Luke is a business analyst at the Direct Line Group. We will hear from him about the route that he took into apprenticeships, what it was like being an apprentice, and any hints and tips that he can give anybody thinking about becoming an apprentice. Enjoy the listen.
I'm joined today by one of our Suffolk alumni, Luke, who is going to let us kind of interview him and find out all about his life as an apprentice, and kind of to help you get that view from the perspective of the people actually doing the apprenticeship. We hear a lot from employers and from training providers, and although that's really useful, I'm sure for our students it's nicer to kind of hear exactly how life is and what other people's experiences of doing an apprenticeship is. So thank you for joining us, Luke, and if you could just start kind of by introducing yourself. What I think is really beneficial about having you talk to us is because you went to a Suffolk school. I think it's nice that we can kind of show students that there are possibilities for every area that you're living in. So if you can just tell us what school you went to, and then if you can tell us the apprenticeships that you've done and what your current role is as well, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. My name's Luke. I went to Holbrook Academy, obviously in Suffolk. I've completed 2 apprenticeships, both for the same organisation. So I started my first one in November of 2016, which was providing financial services and customer services. And then I started my second one in around September of 2019, which was the IS Business Analyst, and that was a level 4 apprenticeship. And I work currently as a business analyst.
Great. So how did you first hear about apprenticeships, and what kind of drew you to apprenticeships? How did you come to doing an apprenticeship? What led you there?
Well, if I'm honest, I went to college for a month or so, and every day I had to get there quite early, and just, wasn't really too into it. It wasn't really my thing, didn't fit with me. And I'd never really planned on going to uni. And when I never really considered the idea, but I looked on the government website and sort of saw this. This was actually the first one I applied for, believe it or not, when I was at college. And it was substantially more pay than most apprenticeships. So I was quite lucky as well. And I believe I only noticed it in the nick of time, because I think I only noticed it a few days before the closing date. So I had to really sort of get on it and apply. But yeah, the idea that drew me to it was, I've never been a huge fan of traditional learning. I like just getting hands on and just doing things. It's the way I am.
That's definitely one of the benefits of doing an apprenticeship, isn't it? That you get to take all the things you're learning in theory and actually get to put them kind of in practice. So I do think that's, like you say, one of the biggest draws for an apprenticeship. One of the things I kind of reiterate all the time, and I know my colleagues do as well, is that doing a higher or degree apprenticeship are incredibly competitive routes. How did you find the whole kind of searching process for an apprenticeship? Did you find that, you say you were lucky to find this one just in the nick of time. Did you see that there were a lot, or was it something you had to search for?
So the first one I started on initially was a level 3, so not a higher. It was, I think it was standard, or whatever it's referred to as. And that one there were quite a few other apprenticeships, but there weren't many probably within financial services, within that sort of area. There was lots in, remember offhand, I think there was some for estate agents, loads of other random things that didn't really interest me, but insurance seemed like a good idea. There were a few rounds of interviews I had to go through. I think there was initially I think I had two rounds of phone call interviews, which were basic questions, I think aptitude tests and so on. And then after that, I had a face-to-face interview. which that was a good chance to sort of prove like I could do well and portray what I wanted to do. And I think I made it clear from the start that as an apprentice I wanted to sort of join for a career. I wasn't just there to sort of do the job and go home. I wanted to sort of go the extra mile and sort of help up.
And I mean, you talk about the recruitment process, so the different interviews that you had. Were you quite surprised at how intense that was, the kind of different interviews that you had to have and the face-to-face interviews? Was the application form intense, or was that kind of
the application it wasn't, it was through the government website, so it was probably easier, that I would deem it easier than applying to most other jobs, because other jobs you have to worry about putting together a CV and this, that and the other, whereas with the government website it's quite nicely designed. It sort of guides you through it, and there's little help boxes and so on. So it was nice applying for it. Some of the questions during the interviews and stuff were obviously tough, and that was probably the first thing I'd interviewed for, because I think that was it's probably the first sort of official job that
must be quite nerve-wracking for your first kind of interview, and also because you really wanted to do it as well. That's kind of a lot of pressure, but it went well, your interview, clearly, because you got the job, so that's good. And in terms of the searching and the application process, I was going to ask you kind of what your top tip would be in terms of the searching and applying, but you have kind of mentioned it there in terms of the government website is so good in that you can set up an account, you can have all your details kind of in there automatically. And I think it's good, especially if you're applying for multiple apprenticeships, because it saves your details. But I would say as well that if it is an apprenticeship, just for anyone listening, if it is an apprenticeship that's not advertised through the government website, you may have to do that, the CV and the covering letter. Would you kind of have any top tips in terms of the interview stages that you would give?
Well, I think first of all, in terms of applying, my top tip is just apply. Never be put off, because when I first saw the apprenticeship, I know I've mentioned it, but even my mum was like, because just mainly the pay was what put me off. It was like, oh, this is above average for an apprenticeship pay. It's must be aimed at older people and so on. Because I was 60, I think I turned 17 when just as I started. So I'd say you lose nothing by applying, and I think believe in yourself and be confident, and I think be honest as well. That's probably one of my main things I do in my sort of day-to-day role. It makes life easier in general. But I'd say just do it. I know it's a very easy thing to say, and it's not always as easy as just doing it, but you do have to almost drive yourself to do things to get to the places you want to, and nobody's gonna, as you said, these are very competitive. So although it would be nice if other people would sort of drive it for you, you do have to drive it yourself.
I think that's really good advice. I always say with people considering apprenticeships, you have to be persistent and you have to really put a lot of your time and effort into it if you want to be successful in finding them. But especially as well, like you say, it's down to confidence, really. Just moving on to kind of the day-to-day life of an apprentice. If you one of the common myths that lots of people have surrounding apprenticeships is, I'll just be making tea and coffee, I won't have any real responsibilities. So could you talk about maybe the roles that you had as an apprentice and the kind of responsibilities that were given to you?
Yeah, sure. So I started initially in a call centre on the phone, doing sort of frontline insurance, and we went through exactly the same standard training as anyone else would go through, sort of 6 months of that, and then you go onto the phone and talk to people and handle that. And even I think when I was still on my apprenticeship, because I was so persistent, said I want to move up, I was at a point where I was sort of covering teams when team leaders were ill, or doing overtime and sort of stuff like that, which was just trying to make myself improve my profile within the company. And then in my sort of most recent role, which was a big jump, obviously I moved office. I moved from Ipswich to Bromley to start the business analyst role, and I can go into detail in a minute about how I sort of opened up the door for that apprenticeship and so on. But there, I've always been treated as a business analyst from the start. I've never been, no one's ever talked down to me. Signature of my email has always said, Luke Bendall, business analyst. And if I have questions, people are always there to help me. But I think, I've just been sort of thrown in at the deep end. I haven't been making tea. I haven't been, doing small talk. When I first started, like the first week or so, the workload was a bit light, but that was because I don't know, maybe they weren't expecting me to put in as much effort. But the first week I ended up going home sort of a few hours early, a few days. but yeah, after a few months, it was just very much what a normal BA would do, working with colleagues in different areas, have my own responsibilities, different commitments, and yeah, it's just hard to go into it without going into a bunch of detail, really.
No, but that's good, I think, because it does help to dispel that myth. You know, you are there to do a job, you are paid to do a job, so you're going to have responsibilities, and you're going to be held accountable to do those. So I think that is really good to hear. Just in kind of how your days were structured, were you did you kind of have a very traditional way of doing, like 4 days a week working and then 1 day a week studying, or kind of what was your working week look like?
So on my level 3, we would because we were assigned, I think it was 10% or so of our time plus any courses and other stuff. So we would basically get like a 3.5, 4 hour slot each week on the level 3, to do any of our studying, read up on stuff, etc. And that was just our, we do what we want with it, and we sort of work with our tutors. On my level 4, I've always, obviously in sort of office jobs, at least, moving environment. So in the call center, you're very much, you clock in, you do your hours, you clock out, and that's why the sort of 3.5 hours are allocated. Within my other role, I've been sort of really free to, I can either take it when I want, I can, book a slot out in my diary, as long as I'm not taking the biscuit and going crazy with my time, then it's fine. And I've always got my work done and stuff like that. But the main difference between the level 4 was I had specific sort of like week-long courses where I would sort of go into London, and have a sort of like a classroom style course, and then at the end of that complete an exam, for a sort of separate certificate, which then went towards my end diploma.
And I mean, you've said already, which is so good, that obviously you had that flexibility with your employer. Did you find in terms of study support, you had plenty of study support from both the employer and the people that were giving you that kind of theoretical training? Was there plenty of support available?
Yeah, I always found that the time we were given was more than adequate to do the work. It wasn't that we have to rush or do loads of stuff in our own time, which I think was one of my worries going into it. Was, with college and stuff, you get loads of homework and do this, that, and the other. Whereas with mine, at least with how my employer structured it and the agreements we had, I can't even recall once that I had to sort of do stuff on my own time. I may have had to do stuff over my lunch breaks, read emails and small things like that, but I never, I was never sort of up late into the evenings. As part of my role now, I am sometimes, I out that, and that's quite a common thing, but never for the studying or anything like that.
We'd like to take a break just to ask you to help us with some feedback. We aim to raise higher education aspirations in as many young people as possible, so your feedback will be welcome. To do this, at your own convenience, please visit tinyurl.com/tyapod. If you missed that, not to worry, you can find the link in the description. Thank you. Now back to the podcast.
We've mentioned a bit about progression, and I think that is important, because people need to understand that an apprenticeship isn't just, right, I'm just going to do this job. It is a kind of pathway to a career, as you say. And I was really impressed by kind of how you got onto your level 4 apprenticeship. So if you could just tell us kind of about that progression and how that happened, that would be good.
Yeah, sure. I'll try not to take too long explaining all the details. As you know, obviously level 4 apprenticeships are quite hard to come by. They're very competitive when they are open and so on.
Yeah.
And as I say, I've always been very, very clear from the start of my career that, I'm serious. I put my time in. I want to work up and I want to do what I can to better myself. So the way it worked exactly for me was, obviously I was in one of the smaller sites based in Ipswich, the Direct Line office, and maybe a couple of times a year, sort of people from the other offices would come down for whatever reason, whether it's to, learn best practices from this office, what different sites doing differently, what works well for them and so on. And they would, basically invite a handful of people along to sort of like a buffet lunch with these people. And I got talking with the chief operating officer, and basically explained to him that I had an interest in sort of technology and so on, this, that, and the other. And in short, he gave me his email and said, look, email me. Sent him an email, and then I got chatting to the chief information officer. She, I had a good conversation with her, very good call. And then she put me into contact with another one of her colleagues, who was my manager up until very recently. I went down to I basically had like a day in the life type day. So before they committed to offering me the apprenticeship or committed to actually creating it, basically I went down there for a day. They showed me what the day-to-day sort of happenings of the role are, and I was very much, this is what I want to do. This is my sort of type of thing. It's problem solving and so on. So off the back of that, it did take about 11 months after that of waiting around for them to actually until I started that new role. So there was lots of back and forth between my then manager and HR. I had to go down to London another time to meet his director to sort of introduce myself, just to get his sort of sign off on the apprenticeship and so on. Because within technology, I was the very first sort of very first apprentice at all within the technology side of the business. There's a couple more now, and there's plans for there to be more. And there's even one higher apprenticeship open at the moment, taking applications.
There you go.
Yeah, take a look at the Direct Line Careers website if you're looking for a higher apprenticeship. But yeah, after that, there was lots of back and forth. I had to commit to move, which was a very, very big thing. So I moved down here, moved out from my parents, and then, yeah, started the role. So I was very lucky in terms of being able to network. But I think it does go back to that confidence thing and being honest about what you want to get, and just, taking a little bit of a risk and so on.
Yeah, and I think that when I heard that, I just thought that's so good, and that's what I wanted everyone to hear, because you just have to be confident and persistent and really work hard at it. And like you say about the networking, I think I always say to people, if they can't find an apprenticeship that they're looking for, then write those speculative letters to employers and ask if they would consider you to support you as an apprentice. And I think that's obviously just excellent proof, and that you've worked hard to get that opportunity for yourself. I think is really good. And I think as well, you've just touched on something that we speak about a lot, is about do you have to move away to do an apprenticeship? Theoretically, no, because there could be opportunities locally. But if you are open to moving away, you're just going to kind of open the door to so many more opportunities, because obviously there are apprenticeships available in the local area. But if you're moving to sort of larger cities and larger areas, they are going to have kind of more opportunities. So I think that's important as well for people to know that, you could consider moving away, and that might open up your kind of options as such. So I think that's an important point to make as well. I would just like to kind of go through your overall experience of an apprenticeship, and I would hope that you're happy to share kind of what you thought were maybe some of the biggest challenges of studying through an apprenticeship. If you have any, maybe you don't.
Just thinking what if there were any challenges. As there was plenty of time for sort of studying and stuff, so I never really had any issue with that.
Yeah, and that's a common one, is that juggling of studying and work. So I think you're very lucky that you've had a good experience in terms of being able to balance studying and working, and it not being too much as well. I think you're very lucky in that respect. I mean, I think it's great that you don't have that many challenges. I think that's a good sign.
I did have to put off some studying for a few months, but I worked out with my employer to once again just get that time back, because I was pulled into a very sort of high intensity project, which meant I didn't have my time to do my studying, so I just rescheduled it and pushed it back a few weeks. But yeah, I don't think there's been any real major problems. Some of the exams, especially for level 4, were challenging and quiz my knowledge and so on. But yeah, there's not been any major blockers really. The interview at the end of the apprenticeship they asked some very hard questions, but yeah, I don't think there's been nothing stood out as bad. Overall, it's been a great experience, I'd say. And I've got a job at the end, and I'm more than happy with sort of how everything's going at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that leads on to my kind of one of my final questions is really, what's been the best part of doing an apprenticeship for you? What's been the thing that you've got most out of it?
Yeah, well, salary is obviously a huge thing.
That must be quite nice.
Yeah, well, I think since I initially started my apprenticeship, which was 2016, and that was on a good salary to start with, my salary since then has increased by sort of 2.5 times or more. But that I did have to get very harsh in my negotiations based on my end of year review and sort of stuff. But yeah, it's been a good experience. It's been a great, because there wouldn't have really been any other way for me to get into the sort of tech side of the business. So it's been a great way for me to branch across and sort of prove myself, and hopefully I've got many more sort of job moves ahead of me in my career to better positions. But yeah, we'll see.
Definitely. I mean, I will kind of round up and say thank you so much for spending some time talking to us. I think I find it really interesting. I know our students are going to find it interesting to hear from someone who's actually done these apprenticeships. I guess if you could just finish off by kind of giving us your overall best advice, best top tip, all things apprenticeships, what would you say to anyone who is just starting to consider an apprenticeship or starting that process of searching? And yeah, what would your advice be?
Well, I don't know. If I was talking to my younger self, the very first thing I would say is just get things done. I used to have a habit of, not making my bed in the morning. I know it sounds very simple, but it applies to work as well. I would never make my bed in the morning. I'd never keep stuff tidy and this, that, and the other. But, just tidying things up as you go along, and, keeping a log of things makes things so much easier, especially helps in my day-to-day work because there's so many things I have to manage. So that, and then also just believe in yourself, be confident, and be honest. Honesty is the best policy.
Yes.
And finally, I know something someone said to me years ago was your network is your net worth. So, the more people you talk to, if you surround yourself with, 5 people who are doing questionable things, then you'll probably be the 6th person to do a questionable thing. If you surround yourself with 5 people who are, aiming towards the stars and being successful, you'll probably end up in the same position that they will. So, just be confident and believe in yourself and do what you think's best.
Great. Thank you so much. I couldn't have, given better advice myself. I think that's really good. So thank you very much for joining us. And we hopefully will speak to you soon.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We had so much more that came out of National Apprenticeship Week. In fact, I strongly recommend that you listen to the previous episode, which gives highlights. You can also visit our YouTube channel. Just search for Take Your Place and look at the Apprenticeships playlist to find some recordings of our live sessions. So until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to our future podcasts at soundcloud.com/takeyourplace or on your favourite podcasting app. You can also find us on Instagram, where we are at takeyourplace_HE, on Twitter at takeyourplaceHE, and on Facebook at facebook.com/takeyourplaceHE/. You can also email us with any questions, requests, or just let us know what you think on info@takeyourplace.ac.uk.
We very much welcome your feedback on this podcast episode. This will also help us to raise higher education aspirations in as many young people as possible. To do this, please visit tinyurl.com/TYA-pod. That's tinyurl.com/TYA-pod. You can find the link also in the description.